What's up, sons and daughters? It's Sam Jesse, and I am joined by a very special guest, big friend of the program, longtime friend of the program, Shelton Moss. Shelton, thanks for joining the Hokieball show.
Sam, it has been an honor. This has been a long time coming, my appearance on the show, so I'm very glad to be on.
Well, it'll be the first of many. I'm sure it is a long baseball season. I am currently in Raleigh, North Carolina, dealing with some allergy season. If you have ever been to this area, allergy season is pretty tough. Everything here right now is covered in pollen. So if I'm a little nasally, that's why, but we fight through it. We're hurt, not injured. And we're going to talk some Hokie baseball. Sheldon, I'm going to be totally honest. Not great baseball since I last hopped on this show with TSL reporter Chris Hirons. Hokies are now sitting at 12-7 and 1-5 in the ACC. They have dropped from the D1 baseball top 25. They now sit at number 58 in the RPI. Not a great couple weeks for the Hokies.
No, not a great couple of weeks. You started off with Boston College last week, a very surprisingly good Boston College team, by the way. They're doing pretty well, and I'm sure you'll talk about it soon. But he lost 2 out of 3 to them. Offense kind of falters, and then next week against Miami, the offense is there, but the pitching staff just kind of falls apart late in a couple of games. So, a couple of winnable games that the Hokies let slip away. Obviously, Miami's a very good team as well. They got a very good offense, but my thing is like in the ACC, you just want to avoid getting swept. And the Hokies weren't able to do that. They got swept by Miami, so they're now down to 1-5 in the ACC. Like we saw last year, if you start off slow in baseball, it's not the end of the world. Tech started 0-4 to start ACC play last season, ended up having a great year. So you don't want to say that this season's over or anything like that. It's certainly far from it. But certainly a 1-5 start's not ideal in conference play.
Not ideal. And let's go back to the last time. It's been a little bit since we covered stuff. So, let's go back a little bit further if we can. The Hokies did play a home series against Charlotte, the 49ers, a good Charlotte team. 3-0 swept that series. Game 1 was a 13-11 walk-off winner by Chris Cannizzaro. Game 2, a 6-3 win. Again, Chris Cannizzaro, he was 4 for 5 in that game with 3 RBIs. Christian Worley pitched really well in that second game of the Charlotte series as well. 5 innings, only giving up 2 hits, having 7 strikeouts and 0 earned runs. And in game 3, a pretty dominant performance again by the Hokies, 12-4 winners. And Sheldon, stop me if you heard this before, but Chris Cannizzaro went 3 for 5 with 2 RBIs. Hokies, a little bit more of a bullpen game. They had 6 pitchers combined to give up only 4 hits and only 4 earned runs. 12 walks in that game, though. So Hokies have been giving up some free bases earlier this season. Coach John Sheff is really high on not giving up free bases. So like to cut down on that a little bit. Thoughts on that series, wrap it up real quick. Could be an important RPI boost. Charlotte's a decent team. They are currently 2-1 in Conference USA with a series win against Louisiana Tech. They have a really impressive midweek win against South Carolina. So that's a Charlotte team that could very well win Conference USA. They're currently sitting in the top 100 of the RPI. So could be an important 3-0 sweep for the Hokies.
Definitely. And even though Charlotte's 9-11, I think that's a little bit misleading. They're a good team. I mean, they're top 80 in the Massey ratings, which is kind of like a advanced rating system, kind of similar a little bit to Ken Palm for basketball, a little bit different. But they're a good team. I think as the season progresses, that you'll start to see the talent kind of shine up. But that's a good win, a series sweep for Tech. Again, Tech has quality wins in their schedule. I mean, I'm not too worried about it right now. They've obviously not playing good ball as of late, but you sweep Charlotte. You get the series win against College of Charleston. Those are some good conference wins, non-conference wins. So, I think their non-conference play is stacking up pretty well so far.
Yep, setting up well. I think overall, if you can take care of it in the non-conference, the ACC is going to give you so many opportunities for big wins. You just got to take it in stride and win the midweeks, win the non-conference when you can. Next, Hokies had a 2-game midweek series with UMass Lowell. I'll put that up there. There we go. Pretty dominant stuff from the Hokies against a UMass Lowell team that, look, the Hokies should dominate them, but that's a team that could end up winning their conference as well. First game, a 22-4 win. The Hokies hit 489 as a team in that game. That went about how it sounds. Game 2, a little bit closer. It was a 7-4 win for the Hokies. Hokies, another bullpen day. Hokies had 7 pitchers combined to give up only 6 hits, gave up 6 walks, but struck out 11. So good midweek for the Hokies. That's pretty dominant, outscoring the opponent 29-8. I mean, that's what you expect, right?
Yeah, it is what you expect. I mean, like I said, you can't make too much of those types of games. If you're a good team playing bad competition, like you want to dominate them, and that's what Tech did. I remember one game where they scored 22 against Radford a couple years ago, but outside of that, I don't remember many 20-plus run games that Tech has had in recent memories. So, I mean, that certainly goes to show how good the offense is.
Yeah, they did have a 17-2 win over Radford earlier this year, but yeah, 20
Right.
plus is a pretty outstanding number. All right, let's get into the meat of this stuff, because then the Hokies hosted Boston College. Now, a little bit about this series. Boston College series, a little bit inclement weather, so they play the Friday evening game, and then they play a doubleheader on Saturday. Less than ideal weather. Obviously not an excuse, but having that doubleheader on Saturday, I think, ended up hurting the Hokies. Hokies dropped this series to Boston College. Let's start with the Friday win. A dominant Friday win, 13-3 win. And I think what was so important about this game, Griffin Green, who has struggled a little bit to start this year, we talked about it. He's been pitching good stuff, but overall, the box scores are just a bit unkind to him. He was unable to get some, key ground outs or anything like that when he needed. But he did pretty well in this game. Only pitched 4 1/3 innings, but only gave up 2 hits and 2 walks, had 5 strikeouts and only 2 earned runs. It's good to see Griffin where the Hokies need him to be as the Friday starter.
Yeah, he's had a couple, good recent starts. The thing that's so important as a Friday start is just giving your team, extended innings. Because the thing is, if you're a Friday starter and you get roughed up, that means the bullpen's got to come in Friday, and you're putting your bullpen in a bad spot for the rest of the weekend, essentially. So I think, from my understanding, what Coach Sheff has done is sort of, have Green be that Friday guy, even though he's not necessarily an ace, so to speak. You put him on Friday. The idea is if you can get that Friday win, then you've got your best, 2 guys coming up after that, to try to win the series. That's the thinking there. I think Arguelles and Hackenberg are certainly capable of, taking up that sort of ace role, so to speak. But the more the Hokies can get from Green, the better they're going to be, because he's the kind of the table setter on that Friday game.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And then you can also throw out some guys in your bullpen and go for a little bit longer. And those 2 guys right now for the Hokies, Henry Weicker pitched 3 2/3 innings, only giving up a hit and 0 earned runs. And then Matthew Siverling, really good to see him back in the fold after an injury-ridden season last year. He pitched the last inning of that game. And this game, I think also you saw some Hokies that were outside of the usual suspects have good hitting in this game. Carson Jones was 2 for 4 with 3 RBIs, and David Bryant was 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. So good to see, some of the guys deeper in the Hokies lineup get some hits in that one. But then Saturday's games, I think you can just boil it down to the Hokies weren't clutch in those games. They couldn't come up with the clutch hit. They couldn't come up with, when you needed to drive a guy in, couldn't do it. An 8-5 loss on the first game on Saturday, where the Hokies, they out hit Boston College 10-8, and they only had 1 error while Boston College had 2. And that's going to happen sometimes, right? Cameron Leary for Boston College had a 3-run homer in the 3rd inning, and that was the difference. It's always tough, I think, to lose. The first loss always, we talk about this in football, the first loss always kind of hits a little harder because you're not expecting it. Obviously, this wasn't the first loss of the season for the Hokies, but it felt like this was a comeback to earth game or day, I guess that Saturday, after the Hokies were just blowing people out for a while.
Right, and that's the thing. Baseball's a sport that's going to always humble you. The thing I look at in Game 2 of that Saturday doubleheader, Hokies had 9 walks as a team issued by their pitching staff. Boston College had just 3. So you add another hit batter, that's 10 free passes that they issued. Now, one thing I would want to mention, you alluded to this a second ago, Sam, the walks have been a major problem for Tech this year. I was looking up the numbers. Tech currently leads the ACC in walk rate, 13%. Ideally, you want to get that down below 10%, because 13% is just way too high. You just cannot afford to get that many free passes, especially if you're a staff like Tech, where the pitching numbers in terms of power, they've been sort of okay, but if you're going to give up walks, and then you give them 26 home runs as a staff. Those two, that's not a good combination. So you just got to limit the free pass as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's why, John Sheff talks about that so much. No free bases, no free bases, because he knows you can have something where you give up a couple walks or you hit a batter or, you give up a steal when you probably shouldn't have given up a steal. And one swing of the bat, and that makes a big difference. Boston College has done a really good job early this season of taking advantage of that. And you saw it there, and we saw it in the next game, in game 3, a 7-3 loss for the Hokies. Both teams with 9 hits, no errors for the Hokies. But again, it was one swing of the bat was the difference. Travis Honeyman, a grand slam in the 7th, gave Boston College the lead. They never looked back. I think that being on a doubleheader, you can kind of just chalk it up to that's a tough day for the Hokies. I don't think anyone played particularly bad. They didn't have a pitcher just suck. I mean, Drew Hackenberg and Anthony Arguelles were fine. Defensively, the Hokies were pretty good. Only one error between 2 games. But, you'd like to come out with at least one of those. Obviously, disappointing to lose a series. Boston College is a bit better of a team than I think we thought they were going to be.
Definitely.
But this might be one where in a month or two, we look back and say, man, that's losing a series to Boston College at home was maybe, might be a little bit harmful for the Hokies when it comes to the ACC standings late in the year.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of looking at the numbers. I mean, have to give me a quick Google here. So they're 25th in the Massey ratings, 14-4. I mean, Boston College isn't a program you normally associate with having great baseball, but it's like at some point you just got to look at the stats and say like, yeah, they're a good team. I mean, and that's just how it goes sometimes. They're not the punching bag that they have been in years past. They started off the year, didn't have a great strength of schedule, but they beat obviously Tech 2 out of 3. They beat Tennessee in extra innings. And they took 2 out of 3 from Florida State. So I mean, that's a pretty good resume.
On the road too. I mean, obviously you don't want to be playing baseball in Boston in March, but both of those series wins on the road. So kind of reminds me of what Pittsburgh was able to do, where Pitt kind of just came out of nowhere with a veteran team and just won some games. Boston College kind of doing that same thing. Every year in the ACC, somebody who's rated high drops down a bit and someone who's rated low punches above their weight. And this year, it might be Boston College. They're certainly playing well. Yeah, and then overall for the Hokies, I think to wrap this one up, hit 271 over the doubleheader on Saturday, only walked 6 times, and they struck out 18 times. It's just not a winning formula in college baseball. I think this one was just kind of on the bats. So tough series loss. Then the Hokies travel down to Miami. Now, granted, the Hokies had won 2 straight series against Miami. Pretty impressive. Not this time. It was a close, hard-fought 2 of the games. 1 of the games, not so much. Hokies get swept in Coral Gables at the Light. Game 1, tough loss. 4-3 loss against the Canes. Hokies actually had a 3-1 lead after a Carson Jones 2 RBI homer in the 4th inning. But after that, the Hokies really struggled against a good Miami bullpen. Hokies got 0 hits off the Miami bullpen. Only 1 walk, struck out 6 times. And Miami star player Yo-Yo Morales with a walk-off double to win that game. Look, it's always tough to lose on a walk-off, but especially on the road when you have a win that could be so clutch for the Hokies. You know, that's just baseball for you.
It is, yeah. I mean, you had a lead in 2 of the games, so from one perspective, it's like, oh, we're not that far away. But at the same time, it's just so tough to let that slip away. And again, talking about the strikeouts and everything. One thing I noticed doing some research, Tech has had 3 15-plus strikeout games this year. Last year, they did not have any. So I think the strikeouts have been a little bit more of a problem than last season. It's not the worst thing. I mean, you look at the offense, the batting average is there, the slugging percentage is there. They're still mashing home runs. But when it comes to like that situational stuff of just putting the ball in play, having a high strikeout rate is definitely not ideal for that. So you want to cut that down for sure.
Yeah, and that's, that was such a key for Virginia Tech last year was just put the ball in play. Virginia Tech's a really athletic team, not as athletic as they were last year with, Schobel, Biddison, and Cross on the base paths. But still a pretty athletic team that can make stuff happen on the base paths. And when you're not putting the ball in play, you don't have that opportunity. You don't have that opportunity to create some errors or drive somebody in or, shift base runners around. So, for the Hokies, I think going forward, that's probably their big key is eliminating free bases and then maybe finding some free bases here or there or eliminating strikeouts. I also think, looking at this game one, Virginia Tech has struggled on Fridays this year. They have the one win against Boston College, but it took a extra innings against Charlotte. You lose the Friday against College of Charleston. Struggle on the Friday against Bryant. I believe it was a while ago, but yeah, they actually lost that game against Bryant 7-3. So on Fridays, the Hokies are 1-3. You'd like to be better on that than that on Fridays. It's really tough to win series when you're losing the first game of 3. So again, Griffin Green, I thought pitched fine in this game. He gave up a few too many hits, 7 hits in 4 1/3 innings. Probably not where you want to be, but he pitched fine against a really, really good offensive lineup, one of the tops in the ACC. So similar to the Boston College series, it was a doubleheader on Saturday. It started off and the game was 21-6. We'll put it that way. Miami scored 10 runs in the 7th to really blow that one open. Just kind of the ball just got rolling and there was no stopping it. Drew Hackenberg was the starter for the Hokies. I love Drew. He's an all ACC caliber pitcher, just not his day. 4 2/3 innings, gave up 10 hits, 2 walks, only 4 strikeouts, 7 earned runs. Really what it looked like more than anything was just struggled for that final pitch, that final strikeout pitch. Miami has really good plate discipline, and they're hitters that, and basically talk about like a shoebox when the count gets down, right? Wait for a pitch in your shoebox. They're really good at that. They're really good at waiting for their pitch, and they don't try to do too much with it. Yeah, that's a tough outing for the Hokies, and you want to be able to take something from every game, but a 21-6 loss, you might just need to sweep that under the rug.
Yeah, I mean, look, baseball, I had a coach that was telling me this the other day. Like, sometimes in baseball, you can't hit, you can't pitch, you can't field, and you playing this game long enough, like those the days are going to happen just like that. So just kind of put it behind you. I will say that, when you look at a guy like Drew Hackenberg, he has never been a big strikeout pitcher, and neither has Green for that matter either. Now, I do think there is an art to pitching to contact, but at the same time, if you have a guy who's, trying to, he's not going to overpower you, kind of like, pitch around, get fly balls, try to get ground balls, depending on, what type of pitcher they are. Sometimes, the ball just isn't gonna fall your way. And that's kind of how it goes. So I think, Hackenberg, look, I have confidence in him. He's still a sophomore. He's getting there. We saw, what he did last season. So I think with a bigger sample size, things will kind of even out. But I'm just saying, as a guy, like if you're not going to have overpowering stuff, sometimes, when those balls are going to play, like we said, they're gonna drop. And so you just gotta, kind of keep working at it.
Yep. And game 3 for the Hokies, better, but still not the result you wanted. A 12-9 loss. Hokies had 13 hits in that game too. Only scored 6 runs, but you had 13 hits. It's not like the offense couldn't do anything. In game 3, somewhat similar. The offense played pretty well. Got 11 hits. Miami only had 9, so you out hit them, but still come up with a loss. Hokies took the lead in the 8th inning with another Carson Jones 2-run homer. Hokies led 9-6, but Miami scored 6 runs in the 8th inning. In that inning, they had 4 hits, were walked twice, and there was 1 fielding error. What I thought was, tough for the Hokies is they tried 4 different pitchers in that inning. They threw Jonah Hurney came in for Tyler Dean to start the inning. Then they brought out Higgins, Settlinger, and Stieg. None of them could really get it done. None of them could grab strikeouts. And that's something where it's hard, where once an inning gets going, once guys get on the base paths, if you're not getting strikeouts, it's hard to get out of that inning without giving up a lot of damage. It just happens. I think that's one where, maybe you don't commit that error. Maybe a line drive goes right to an outfielder instead of just to the left of them and you get an out that way. That's the difference in this game, right? So the Hokies, yeah, they lost the series 0-3, but they were leading in both of those games, lost one of them on a walk-off, and the next one they were leading in the 8th inning.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think the bullpen has been pretty good for the majority of this year, which, we can talk about. It just was not good in this game, but they've I think Tech has one of their strengths is their bullpen depth. And you talk about, their ability to go through multiple guys in those innings. It's kind of different from last year where it was like, you're just trying to like throw darts at the board, so to speak. This year they've got really good, reliable guys. You look at some of the stats here. I was looking up the numbers. You take a guy like Brady Kirtner. I mean, he's striking out almost half the batters he's facing. Like he's got a 44% strikeout rate. I mean, that's very good. Hasn't given up a hit yet, and so far in 7 innings. You mentioned Henry Weicker. He's at 37% for the strikeout rate. Also up there is Christian Worley. So I mean, they've got good arms. It's just they kind of all had a bad day at the same time.
Yeah, and that's going to happen. Credit to Coach Chef and Coach Fechdahl. They threw everything they could to win this game. That's a really good Miami team, though. I mean, very, very good. They're battle tested. They're really talented. They know how to play offensively. I think for the Hokies, this was very reminiscent of the Georgia Tech series last year, where you played a really good team on the road early in the season, and the other team came up with clutch hits, and the Hokies didn't. Even down to, an error late in the game, kind of sparking the winning inning for Georgia Tech last year. Same kind of thing happened this year. And look, those things are going to happen. You would like to avoid them, but it's not like the Hokies went down there and got smacked all 3 games. Yes, one game got out of hand. The other 2, ball bounces one way and, one piece of contact, Hokies might win that series. So overall, head held high going into the rest of the season. There's a lot to play for. Not the start that you wanted, but it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse, and that's the reason they play a 30-game season, 30-game conference season. If you look at last year as well, like the one positive point from last year's tough start to the year is that Tech was competitive in every game, like you mentioned. Now this year there have been a couple of blowouts. It's not quite as competitive as it was last year, but you talk about those one-run games, having a lead late in the 8th inning. They're close. They're close, and that's the most important thing. You can always predict how well a team, roughly how well a team is going to do going forward based on, are you competitive in your games? And right now, Tech is competitive. They're just not quite there. And hopefully, eventually, the breaks will start to go their way.
Let's stick with the positivity. I like that.
Yes.
It's early in the season. Let's stay positive. What are 3? I have 3 things that I loved from this. Throw in whatever you want. My number one thing is like we've said, the offense has continued to produce. There really hasn't been too many games this year where the offense hasn't done anything. Yes, I think they need to get a little bit more clutch at times, but this is still an offense that's putting up a ton of runs. They're dangerous 1 through 9. They have guys that can plug and play. Guys like Eddie Iser, Carson Jones, they're coming up with big hits. The Hokies aren't just 4 or 5 guys at the top of the order. It's a full lineup again this year. And I think that'll pay dividends for the Hokies later in the year. So offense continuing to produce, continuing to put the bat on the ball. Do need to cut down on strikeouts, I agree. But overall, you have to be happy with the Hokies offense so far.
Yeah, the biggest positive from the offense, I think, is that the power numbers are there. They're top 30 in batting average, top 6 in slugging. They're hitting a bunch of home runs, not drawing as many walks as ideally you'd like to. But, part of that's because they're just mashing the ball around. Like a guy like Chris Cannizzaro, he's not drawing a lot of walks, but he's hitting doubles and home runs. Like that's the reason why. So, cut down on strikeouts a little bit. I agree as well. I'm probably going to, wait for things to kind of play out a little bit more before I start, making too many conclusions from the stats we've seen thus far. But the early returns are pretty good. And honestly, if you go to the games and just watch based on the eye test, like you can tell these guys are all, capable ACC level hitters. Guys like Cannizzaro and Hurley, we know what he's capable of. They got the bat speed, the physical tools, like none of that stuff. I'm not worried about the offense. Like I have a ton of trust in Coach Kurt Elbin, who's done a great job with the hitters, the past few years. I mean, that's a spot where I think Tech eventually will be fine. They just got to figure out the pitching.
Yeah, and speaking of the pitching, another positive I had, Griffin Green seems to have been getting back to his old self. A little bit of struggle early in the year, but the last 2 starts for him have been pretty good. over those last 2 starts. In both of them, he went 4 1/3 inning. He's only given up 4 earned runs in those 8 2/3 innings. Pretty good stuff. Again, you don't expect him to be this all-world ace. You don't expect him to get a ton of strikeouts. He's a bit of a contact pitcher. But when he can go out there and give you 4 plus, maybe 5 innings, and then you can work some of your longer bullpen guys, you like that as a Friday starter.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about that. And look, if he does struggle, then I think if you're Chef, you might want to consider kind of readjusting the rotation because you can't just afford to have your bullpen get exhausted on day one. So for the time being, like you said, 5 innings, hopefully 6. Like he's not because he pitches contact. He's not a guy that's really going to go super long. So just get 5 out of him, ideally 6. It's probably the good benchmark, and then just have the bullpen go from there. Because I really like this bullpen. I mean, I really do. I think they've got the peripherals are there. They're striking guys out. Like that's the most important thing. So the depth there is much better, and I think that's going to bode well going forward.
Yep. And last thing I loved, Hokies. I think going into this season, the question was the Hokies will have star power, but will that star power be able to match what guys like Schobel and Cross and Biddison and Cade Hunter did last year? So far, the top of the Hokies lineup has done that. Chris Cannizzaro, Jack Hurley, and Carson DiMartini as a group are hitting 348. You like how they've been playing. They've been doing it in the field as well, have been very good. I think if you're the Hokies, you feel like that core of 3 guys, and then you can add in, Eddie Iser, who's been playing really well, has had some good games. Carson Jones seems to have come on well as well. You feel like your core of your lineup, you can take that up against any pitcher in the ACC.
Correct. Yes. I mean, like I said, they've all got the tools. And I could also, if I may, maybe talk about the defense too. I feel like last year, Tech, in my opinion, Tech's pitching staff overperformed because of how good their defense was. Like you look at the defensive alignment, you got, Gavin Cross, a stud in center field, Tanner Schobel, stud at shortstop, Carson DiMartini, Eddie Malinowski at second base, who's a lockdown defender, and you had Nick Biddison as well. All those guys, except for DiMartini are gone. I mean, Malinowski is still there, but he's not playing as many games. So I think just based on kind of the stats I've looked at, some of the more advanced metrics, I don't think Tech's defense is quite as good as they were last season. Now you might feel differently if based on just what you've seen, but I think part of the pitching struggles is not just the pitchers themselves, but also the defensive regression. So like I said, if you've got a good defense, that will make any pitcher look good because you can convert balls hit in play to outs. That's what it's all about. It's converting balls hit in the field to outs, and that's what they did a great job of last year. And as a result, their pitching staff did a great job. They Tech finished last year. They had the lowest ERA in conference play. So I think they got better as the year progressed. And again, part of it was defense. So you got to have the defense if you want to get outs.
Yeah, and I think part of that fielding as well. The Hokies have a lot of guys who, this year, guys like Schobel, Biddison, they're going to make a lot of plays. I think this year the Hokies is more about avoiding mistakes in the field, which is totally fine. If you can avoid errors in the field, you're doing pretty well. So, the Hokies, I would like to see a little bit more flash from the field. They haven't turned a lot of double plays. And DiMartini is a walking highlight at third base, but outside of him, you need to still be rangy on the infield. The outfield's been fine. If guys are hitting home runs, there's obviously nothing you can do about that. So, I think the Hokies feel good about their fielding, much better than it was, a few years ago where the Hokies really struggled. But I don't think you're going to see an increase in ERA just by, the math is going to have you, regress a little bit from what the Hokies were showing last year. So bats will need to keep up with that.
And like I said, just real quick, like I said, it's even though the defense might not be quite as good, the good news is that Tech's bullpen is much better at getting strikeouts. So if you can just prevent the ball from being hit at all, that's always a good thing. So in that respect, there's much more there's reason to be positive.
All right, something that needs to improve, Shelton.
I mean, let's see. I would say some guys have struggled with strikeouts this year. You just look down the line. Carson Jones has had a rough time. He's about 30% strikeout. He's a guy that's a big power hitter, so you
Mhm.
kind of that comes with the territory a little bit. Michelle is around 32%. David Bryan 29%. And then Garrett Giebel and Eddie Iser up there as well. So that's probably one thing I look at. It's like, can they hit for power? Yes, but they're also going to whiff a lot. I expect those numbers to kind of go down as the year progresses. Hopefully, if assuming that these guys are as good as I think they are, and I think they are that good. So that's probably the biggest thing is just being able to hit for contact a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other thing I would say was, bullpen consistency. Um, you got to be able to rely on guys. Sometimes you're not going to have it, and that's okay. But as a staff, you need to be able to get the job done. I think what we saw in that Miami series was late in game when the ball went to the bullpen, and hey, we need outs right here. They just weren't able to get it done. I think going forward in this season with how incredibly, incredibly deep and talented the ACC is, the bullpen's going to need to be relied on a lot because you're not always going to be able to get 4+ innings out of your starter. I mean, it's going to happen in some games. Bullpen's got to come through. Another thing, haven't gotten the clutch hits yet. Had a few, but if you look at the Boston College series and you look at the Miami series, there were just some instances where the Hokies needed a hit, they needed a run and just couldn't get it. Obviously, sometimes you're going to get that, sometimes you're not. But overall, when you lose, so much star power in Tanner Schobel, Gavin Cross, all those guys, other guys need to be able to step up in those clutch roles. We've seen a couple of that. We've seen Chris Cannizzaro do pretty well, but other than that, some guys are going to need to step up and come with those clutch hits. All right, last segment of review that we have, our player of the weeks. For me, I'm going to go Carson Jones, mostly because we've seen him return to being a power hitter. He was 4 of 8 in the series against Miami with 2 home runs and 4 RBI. Really, really good stuff from him. If he can get back to how he was playing at the end of last year and continue to play how he did against Miami, I think that makes the Hokies lineup really, really dangerous. Adding a power bat who's going to hit probably 6th or 7th in the lineup.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it seemed like last year it was kind of a case where everything just kind of clicked. Like you had all these guys kind of come together and have career years. Everyone was healthy. And I think one of the most impressive stories was Carson Jones. Like he comes out of nowhere, like late in the season, and hits 8 home runs in 21 games, and you're just like how on earth is this happening? So it was good to see him, kind of improve. I think with the way last year kind of ended for him, you sort of expect like, okay, now he's arrived. Like he's going to be a big fixture in this lineup. But the power numbers didn't really materialize until the last couple of weeks. But now I think he seems to be getting more on track. He's hitting the ball harder. So I certainly expect a lot of good things coming from Carson Jones again if he can cut down those strikeouts.
Yep, and the Hokies will need the back half of that lineup to continue to perform. If you have 2 or 3 guys who are carrying your whole offense, then you're not going to really win a lot of games because there's going to be too many empty innings. Something that, I talked about in the last podcast with Chris Hirons was seemed like the Hokies offense was pretty reliant on big innings, on kind of getting to the bullpen. Need to be able to chip away at a team a little bit, and haven't really seen that too much. Hokies will need to continue to kind of just 1 through 9 produce. And I think a main part of that is, like you said, getting those strikeout numbers down, get on base somehow. If you can knock a guy over, do that. If you need to play a little bit of small ball here or there, do that. But you have to avoid the empty outs. All right. So I know you want to get to the game today where the
That's
Hokies
right.
host the Virginia Military Institute Keydets. Really good opportunity for the Hokies to get back on track. VMI, not a bad team, but one, you should expect the Hokies to win, and you should expect the Hokies to. I think this is almost like a mental reset game at home against VMI.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I followed VMI this year. They have a very good offense. They steal a ton of bases. Now, level of competition, probably not great. Again, you'd expect Tech to win. I don't know if they put down the money lines for college baseball games, but certainly the Hokies are going to be favored by a few runs in this one. But just a good chance to, kind of get off this losing streak. And then you got Pitt coming up next week, which, you'll mention. Another good chance to win an ACC series against an opponent that's a little bit down. So right now, this is just a chance to kind of right the ship and get some positive mojo going.
Yep, VMI currently number 163 in the D1 baseball RPI. That's a roughly middle of the road. Hokies will like to get a win in that one, and then Pittsburgh travel road series against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh struggled a bit, 8-9 to start the year, 1-5 in the ACC. They are all the way at 225 in the RPI. Should be an opportunity for the Hokies to get a road series dub. I think if you were, looking into ACC series, that could be a potential sweep for the Hokies. That would be one. But of course, you got to go up there and play well. Everyone's talented in this conference. There are no easy weekends.
Yep, you just got to take, like last year, just take it one game at a time. Eventually, everything will work itself out.
All right, Sheldon. Well, I know you want to get to that game. Hokies will host VMI today. By the time this comes out, the Hokies will be probably traveling up to Pittsburgh to play that game. You can watch that game on ACC Network Extra. All three of those games will be up there. Should be a good time. Hokies will have a much needed weekend series win, we hope.
Certainly so.
All right. Well, thanks, Sheldon, for coming on. We'll be back next week. Who knows who my guests will be? We'll figure that out, but should be a fun time. Thank you for coming on, Sheldon.
Yep, it has been an absolute pleasure, man. We'll do it again sometime.
All right. See you.